I'll say hello too. My name is Ben. As you know by now, I'm a developer advocate at Google. My job here is to help the web be easier. Oh, hi, Zara. The web be easier for developers and for users and faster also, and just kind of work better for people. I did used to do music full time. You may see behind me a couple of instruments because this is where I live and this is where I have my music stuff usually. And now it's also my office because the office is closed. Although I was shocked to talk yesterday to Brigitte and see him in an office because none of us here are in offices. I know Sweden's doing it quite differently, and you're out and about and doing things. So it must be kind of nice to have that. We don't have that over here. But I live in New Jersey, near New York, and the outbreak here is, I think, the worst in the world right now. But it's getting a lot better. We're lucky that we're safe and have a house to walk around in. And moved out of New York a little while ago. Hope you're all safe where you are as well. And I'm glad to see you all over here to discuss AMP. And it seems like most of you are new to AMP. Maybe you're all new to AMP, which is totally fine. We're going to do a basic introduction here. And the goal here is to just do a really quick talk on AMP, maybe like 5 or 10 minutes, make it as fast as possible. So instead of listening to me talk, which will get boring after a while on a conference, we can instead do something together, which will be to build a little sample website together. If you have questions as we go, please go ahead and stick those things in the chat if they're, or you can also just say things if you want to, and we'll just kind of do it and see what happens. So yes, this actually is a short version of some courses we made a couple of years ago. This is actually a shorter version of the entire beginning course, all done in an hour and a half. So how about that? There are two more courses that teach more advanced techniques with AMP. This is just kind of basic stuff. Although we'll also get into a more interesting, more advanced thing at the end of the day. So here we are. Why AMP actually exists is to solve this problem that's been a problem on the web for a little while. If you've listened to talks by people from Google or other JavaScript developers, you've probably heard about the problem of web performance, that a lot of sites are too slow and not for any good reason. They're slow because of programming techniques that are used that make things slow. A lot of sites have too much JavaScript that isn't being used that much, or rely on large JavaScript frameworks, or they're WordPress sites that have a lot of plugins that add a lot of JavaScript and a lot of CSS and a lot of large images. And if you're on a really nice phone, on a really nice connection, if you've got an iPhone or your newest Galaxy phone or Pixel on a 4G connection, it isn't so bad usually. But a lot of users have phones that are not that high powered and execute JavaScript pretty slowly and load things more slowly. And a lot of people are on 3G connections out there. If you're ever, on a train or in a place where it isn't a good connection, you've all gone to sites that load slowly. And it turns out that actually, when I last checked the stats, 40% of people were using 2G connections out there. So to build for everybody who actually has a device and is out there somewhere trying to get to your website, it's important to make things that are fast. Otherwise, you're just losing some users. And also, even if you're on a faster connection, a site takes 3 or 4 seconds to load and become visible and to become functional. It's just annoying to users. When you go to a site that's really fast, like Amazon or Wikipedia or Google search, then it's just a really pleasant experience. And a lot of stats out there show that people who are on sites that are faster will stay on the site for longer, will buy more stuff, will read more stuff, will bounce more slowly. There's a lot of advantages to making things fast. In particular, look at this guy over here. He's looking at your website. It's so slow, it's not loading. He's taken up smoking and drinking to cope with the emotional stress of looking at your slow site. So to make this guy's life longer, you must make your site faster. So speed matters on the web. There's more things that matter also. A couple other things that matter. Of course, a lot of things matter, but a couple other things that AMP tries to actually fix is the problem where pages don't respond for a while because you can see something, but JavaScript is still executing. Event listeners are still being added to the page, and things aren't working yet. So you can tap on a menu, try to scroll, and nothing happens. And for someone using a phone, this is a really baffling experience. You're used to your phone just being fast and responding to things immediately. If it doesn't respond to things really fast, you have a very negative reaction to the website you're on. You'll have to just go to something else that's easier. Also, a problem that the web has is that sometimes you'll be looking at a site, especially a content site or a recipe site, or various kinds of sites and looking at some text, and suddenly it vanishes or it moves somewhere because an ad pops in and a video stops playing or something, and then everything moves to accommodate that video or that ad, or an image pops in and everything moves to accommodate that. This is called layout instability. And when things bounce around the page, when you're trying to look at content, it's also not a good experience. These are a few of the problems that AMP aims to improve. So, what is AMP? AMP simply is, well, it's really just adding more HTML tags to HTML. HTML was created a long time ago to just be a document description language, to say things like, this is a paragraph, this should be in boldface. It didn't have things like, this is a menu, this is a Twitter embed, this is an interactive image slider on the screen. Those things weren't part of HTML because those didn't exist in the web. As the web became more complicated, people began to add more and more JavaScript to add functionality. So now, when you want to add functionality, you add JavaScript, which is fine, but often people add a lot of JavaScript, and that causes the problems we've discussed before. So AMP adds new tags to HTML that do those things HTML doesn't actually do yet, and it's starting to do a little more, but doesn't actually do. So AMP adds tags to HTML that do these things, and to make this happen, AMP has its own JavaScript that it runs to make these things happen for you. Conversely, AMP strongly discourages you from writing your own JavaScript, which is a big change for people on the web. But it's really a strong move in favor of let the AMP team write the JavaScript. You can just make the HTML and some JavaScript to do things that are custom functionality, and you'll have a faster site that's easier to maintain with much less code. As a reward for this, there are AMP caches out there, and there's an idea of valid AMP. If you follow the rules AMP sets out for fast performance, for good layout, and for accessibility for people that have problems using devices, then web spiders out there will find your content and put it into what's called an AMP cache, where it will then be served much more quickly from someone else's servers. So the most famous one of these is Google's AMP cache, and Google's web spiders are out there looking for valid AMP pages and then putting those into an AMP cache. If you go to your site from Google search, it then will load very, very quickly. By the way, some of these things are changing. AMP announced a little while ago its plans to, sorry, Google announced a little while ago, and AMP also announced this as well, plans to give non-AMP pages that are also fast and also have stable layout the same treatment in search as AMP pages. It hasn't happened yet, but it's on the horizon. And by the way, Google started AMP and created AMP for publishers to use, but it really is an open source project. Google's almost finished giving AMP to the OpenJS Foundation. Anybody can contribute to the AMP project. It's open source, it's on GitHub. You can just go there and you can be involved if you want to be involved. If you're a JavaScript programmer, I encourage giving it a try. Let me digress from this now to show you how this looks in real life. So this is an example of seeing AMP over here. We're just going to simulate a mobile device over here. How about a lovely iPhone Plus? We'll make it bigger. There it is. Okay. And we're just going to go to google.com, for example, and do a search for something kind of in the news. News these days. Look at all these things that are in the news. How about the election? That's a good newsy kind of thing. So you'll see over here in the US, and this is also true in all Scandinavian countries, there's this thing at the top called a top stories carousel. All of these articles over here have a small lightning bolt in the corner. That indicates they're AMP articles. Everything in this top stories carousel is AMP. Looking down a second carousel with more AMP articles, a third carousel, I guess this is very newsworthy. You may also see down here other things that are not in the carousel that also are AMP articles. So in certain cases, not all cases, because Google knows that an AMP page will load very quickly, and it can't contain JavaScript that runs immediately, and it can't all even load images by itself. It knows that an AMP page can be loaded very quickly, at least the basic framework can be loaded quickly. So Google will actually pre-render this article in an iframe invisibly. When you tap on this on your phone, it then appears almost immediately. So tapping on this one over here, I'm going to avoid Fox News. And there it is. It's fast. Of course, we're on Wi-Fi now. We're not on the 3G connection, but it's fast even on a 3G connection. You can see that things load stably. Also notice as you scroll down, things will begin to load only then. So things like ads will only load when you get close to them, making the page even faster. This also, I think, is the, can we do this here? We can do this. This is the top stories carousel. We can see various articles this way, which is kind of, I think, kind of neat. Now, again, this, we've announced this will change at some point, and that Google will then allow non-AMP articles into this top stories carousel if they're just as fast and just as stable as AMP articles. One advantage of using AMP is this AMP cache thing. That's a lot of stuff already. Any questions about all of that? I'm going to look in the chat also here because who knows? Maybe questions in the chat. But my actually, there we go. It's very slow here. Okay, I don't see 105 errors in the console. That's interesting. I wonder why that was. Look at all those errors there. Yeah, it looks like some problems here in a few of these sites. It looks like AMP YouTube not found. Interesting. Well, that's for a different day. I think there's some problems in some of these pages over here. Course problems. Yeah, some JavaScript problems. I don't know what this is over here. This is not AMP stuff, by the way. This is just people's local JavaScript. It can be put there from ads. See this yield mo thing? It's probably some sort of ad analytics thing, I imagine. Yeah. So even on these AMP pages, you still can have bugs. Very sad. All right. So going on over here, we're going to finish this up and do some exercises very quickly, and then we're going to maybe talk about AMP some more later on. We discussed this before. We discussed all of these things, I think, just now. So we'll skip this slide over here. JavaScript, the AMP cache, HTML. I already said this before. The AMP cache will also validate, well, sorry, the AMP cache will optimize pages in other kinds of ways. It will try to optimize and compress images and do various things to HTML to make it more efficient for the browser. And by the way, you can also do these things on your own origin with some tools we have available to you to do the AMP caches optimizations if you're serving AMP pages from your own origin. Some of these things over here, preventing cross-site scripting attacks, and so on and so forth, adding source set. Okay. Oh yeah, AMP. Here's how it looks. This is it. So when you're making a YouTube embed in AMP, for example, you're not adding YouTube's JavaScript to your page. You're instead using this new tag AMP has added to HTML called AMP YouTube. And by the way, this uses web components. If you've used Polymer before, other web component kinds of frameworks, this is similar. It's web components using Shadow DOM. And there are a few things you'll see in most AMP components. At the top here is this thing called layout equals responsive. AMP has got its own layout system where it will do things to make your page easier to lay out. So for example, if you say layout equals responsive, it makes the component automatically responsive so that the component itself will shrink as its container shrinks and expand as the container expands. So automatically this will work on any device and look nice on any device. You also give the width and the height of the component here. This is different than HTML, which doesn't require these things usually. AMP requires at least the height. It recommends the width. Why is that? Because that way it can then lay out the page in advance and leave space for this thing. So then as your user scrolls down and gets towards YouTube video, it'll pop into its space over there and things don't shift around on the screen. And finally, the important part here, data-video ID. This is YouTube's ID it uses to associate the video. If you go to YouTube, there's usually this question mark equals or question mark V equals something. That's the ID. And so you get the ID from your video, you stick it in here, and there it is, a YouTube embed. AMP aims to be simple like this. It's kind of like a way of making websites that's somewhere in between CMSs and doing your own coding. CMSs usually involve no programming. You're just adding plugins to do things and using an editor. Or you can use your own JavaScript, CSS, and HTML, do it all yourself, use third-party JavaScript as you can find it to do other more complicated things. AMP is somewhere in between these things. So AMP, you're really controlling everything. You control the CSS still. You just have much less or no JavaScript of your own. Any questions about this? I must be incredibly clear today, or you're all doing something else right now. Maybe you're getting dinner. For this course over here, all you need to do is HTML. If you know HTML, you're all set. CSS isn't really required for these exercises today, although you can customize things with CSS. JavaScript, not required for today. All right, so let's do some exercises. Let's do this thing. We're going to actually build a little cheese bicycles shop website. bicycles made from cheese, things the world need right now. And we're going to use a thing called Glitch. Now, you don't have to use Glitch. You can use your own IDE and your own local web server. The advantage of Glitch is that it can happen all online. And for this, it's especially nice because you can actually share your URL with people on the chat as you do it. We can look at your success and admire your creative site, or if you get stuck, help you debug. And this has been super useful in these workshops. People can just add their Glitch URLs to the chat. We can look at them, and everyone can share what everyone else is doing. It's pretty neat. So how does this work over here? The course starts over here at this address, glitch.com/tilde-show-you-way. If you go over here, you will, well, here it is already auto-completing for me. I've done this before clearly. See this thing we made, which is basically starter code for this whole project. And there's actually a beginning to your site with a header and a beautiful picture of a cheese bike and some text. Perfect. So what you want to do with this is you want to copy it to your own local copy. Not local, your own copy that you'll own. So to do this, you'll see a button somewhere saying remix this, a remix button. For me, it's different because I own this, but it may be called something else, which the word remix in it. Remix is their clever kind of hipster word for copy it. So I'll do this right now myself. Thank you for putting that there into the chat. Yeah. And now I have this, I got very long words this time. Glitch names these things with random words, which is kind of fun. They're more memorable, but they can be a little bit hard to pronounce sometimes. I have here quintessential excessive saffron. That's mine. So let's look at this for a minute here. What there is in here are a few things for later exercises. You don't need this for today or this for today. You don't need the server because nothing's going to involve a server. There's a README. What you're going to use today is here in the public directory, index.html. This is the page you're going to work on today. And also you'll be using this assets area over here. So if you haven't done it already, remix this thing and make your own copy. Anybody having trouble doing that? If you are, then let us know now because you'll need this for the rest of the day.
Can you repeat the steps again one more time?
Yes, you want to go to this address that you just kindly posted here in the chat, and then look for a button saying remix, and then click that button. That's it. When you get there, when you've done this, look at your new site over here and look at index.html.
Yep, got it.
Okay, great. Time for a bit of water here. We'll turn to our deck over here. So this is the glitch editor, as you saw a minute ago. It's a nice code editor. It does a few things for you. It tries to autocomplete things for you and close your HTML tags for you. And it's got a bunch of images. The way you use images here is pretty simple. You go to the assets area. We've provided here a bunch of images you can use. Click on an image of some sort. You get a close-up of the image and this long, elaborate URL, which unfortunately is unique URL that Glitch uses throughout its whole system. It's quite long, but this is what you'll have to use this image here. It gives you also the size, which is useful in AMP because you have to know the size for things. So that's how you find images. You go to assets, click on one of these things, and there you go. Any questions on that? If not, we'll do our first exercise here. Or sorry, one more thing you can do. This is optional. If you're using Chrome, you can get the AMP validator, which I use. It helps you determine whether your page is valid AMP or not. And again, making valid AMP is only useful if you want to use the cache. You're not required to have valid AMP, but it's kind of nice because it's full of best practices for performance. Also, the cache makes things faster when you get to your page from search. So the AMP validator you can find by doing the instructions over here, or just going and searching on Google for, I don't know, Chrome AMP validator, for example. And you'll find here, there it is. I'll put this in the chat in case you want to install it if you're using Chrome. By the way, Chrome is not required. You can use Firefox for this exercise or whatever else you want to. Yeah, there's that validator. That's actually an on-screen validator you can use. It has a link to this. And then here's the Chrome extension. If I go up here, you may see here this little grayed out lightning bolt. This is a validator extension. If I go to an AMP page, say amp.dev, which our team runs and is made with AMP, then you'll see it turn green, which means this is a valid AMP page. And looking at this in the console, you can see here, I'll make it a little bigger. If I go look at the elements, you'll see some AMP things lying around. AMP state, which is AMP state variables, AMP's lightbox component, all these things over here you can see on this page. Notice also this is just responsive. So this works on mobile and desktop devices alike. So the AMP validator, if there are errors, it will show an error message. So I'm going to do that also. I've got over here this thing I made for AMP script, the custom JavaScript components. It's got an error on it here. As you see over here at the top, there's a little 1 and it's turned red. I've got one validation error here. Now, you can't see this on a screen share, so I can't show you this when it pops up, but I can do this a different way. I can also append to this URL pound development equals 1, and then it will show errors here in the console. Notice over here, I've got this error. So I'll put that in the chat as well. If you want to skip the validator and still, why is this so slow over here? I'm having some weird problems today. Clicking on this little chat button, like 4 seconds to pop up. If you append this over here to the end of your URL, then you will get this experience in the console. I'm going to check my monitor for a minute and see if things are slowing this thing down. No, I think it's just the meat taking up a lot of CPU. I don't know why it's so much. Also, my camera settings thing is taking up a lot of CPU. I'm going to kill that too. Huh. All right, now it's gone. If I turn into weird color, let me know, because I turned yellow last time I did this. I was yellow for the entire course. So if I'm yellow, let me know. The color correction was off. All right, so there's that. There's that. There's that. The validator. So let's start looking at AMP over here for a second. You'll notice if you look at this project over here, that all AMP pages that are valid have a little lightning bolt over here after HTML in the tag, or an AMP, the word AMP, that indicate this is a valid AMP page. A couple more things you'll find in the head that are of some interest. This meta charset equals UTF-8, just AMP wants you to have the standard encoding. Also, you'll notice below that, there's AMP's own JavaScript that uses to run the page. This is the AMP runtime. And over here, there's this meta viewport tag, which just makes it look good on all devices. AMP also recommends that you use and requires for valid AMP. Over here is this link rel equals canonical. This is a little more complicated. When AMP was first created, it was designed for mobile pages. So publishers would have a desktop page that wasn't AMP and a mobile page that was AMP for the same content, and link those things together with these link tags. So you'd have 2 pages for the same content. This still is used a lot, but really we recommend that you use AMP for the desktop and mobile page because it's simpler than having 2 different pages for the same thing. This is still required. In this case, this is going to link to itself because this is the only page we have for this content. There's no AMP and non-AMP version, so it links to itself. Finally, this AMP boilerplate that requires, and then your own CSS is here in the style AMP custom tag. AMP for valid AMP requires you to put your CSS inline because that way it avoids a network request. So a single request can load the entire page. And at the bottom here is our actual page, which is very small, but very, very powerful. So there's our page. And what we're going to do, first of all, is use our very first AMP component. This is a very simple component. It's called camp-img. So AMP doesn't replace HTML tags with a couple exceptions, maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. The most notable is images. Instead of using image, it wants you to use amp-img instead. And why is that? Because the image tag has been improved by AMP, but the amp-img over here. One thing that it does, for example, is it leaves space for the image so that things load up around it. So it guarantees stable layout. Also, it provides built-in lazy loading, which is called formally in viewport prioritization. As you're scrolling and scrolling down, or I guess scrolling down towards images that are off the page, they'll load in before you see them instead of loading in all at once. So automatically, if you have large images at the bottom of the page, they can't slow down how the top of the page gets rendered. So AMP image has various advantages. It's pretty simple to use. Like almost all AMP components, you give a width and a height. You choose your layout type, you close the tag, and there you are. So now we'll give this a try ourselves. Oh, sorry, more examples here. AMP Twitter, similar. A Twitter embed is done the same way: width, height, layout, tweet ID, and there it is. And we saw this one before. And also, it's worth noting that certain components require adding their own JavaScript. So to make AMP runtime smaller, if you use many components, you load in JavaScript for those components separately. It's like a 10K, 8K long JavaScript file that runs that component. And we'll be using this throughout this day. Anyway, our first task here is to use amp-img. So we discussed these things before about lazy loading and smooth page layout with the dimensions. So our first task over here is to replace image with amp-img on our site. And all you have to do is change image to amp-img, close the amp-img tag, use the source, but also add width and add height. That is our first task. If you get stuck on this, by the way, you can also refer to the handy AMP documentation, which we'll be using also throughout this day. amp.dev, the documentation site. If you're stuck on a certain component, you can search for it over here, like amp, can't type apparently, amp image, and then you'll get a nice reference page over here about how to use it and some examples and other handy things like that. So now this is your task. I'll get off the mic here for a minute. I'll do this myself also. And if you get this done, if you're using the validator, you'll notice that your validation errors will go away. Because currently we have an error here. I didn't show you the error, did I? I'll show you the error. If I go back over here and I show this thing in a new window, I see one error here, which is this image error, because image wants to be replaced by amp image. So having seen that, let's go back over here and replace the image with amp image. If you get it done, then feel free to add your glitch link here in the chat. Show it on the screen. If you're stuck, also feel free to add your glitch there in the chat, and we can also try to debug for you. Okay, mine is done. Of course, I've done this before. Oh, here we go. Button radical frame. Let's see this over here. Okay. It's valid amp. I think your dimensions are a little bit off because it looks like it's pretty compressed over here. But otherwise, you've done something good. I'm guessing your dimensions aren't quite there. Taking a look at this over here, we can see what you've done. It chose height 150, which you can do. It just made it very, very small. And we have Sumit over here. Adam Holly Thought. This looks like you've done it. You didn't close the amp image tag though. It may still work. Closing it is the way to go. You've lost your text because it's all inside the image tag, I think. If you look over here at the elements, we'll probably see, yeah, our text is buried somewhere inside the image now. I guess it's over here inside the amp image tag. So it vanished. Oh, sorry, width and height should be 640, width 480 height. But also you see that in glitch also if you find the image there. Anybody else stuck, or are we doing very well here? I'm going to assume we've got this mostly done and show you my solution here. So it's just amp image, the source, the width, the height, close the tag, and you're done. Here it is also in a beautiful slide. Same thing, source, width, height, we're done. We got some more here. We have galvanized abalone wolf. Seems a
Hi
little
Ben,
slow. Hey,
hello. Yeah,
hi
hi
Prashant.
Prashant here. How to add? Like I made the changes. Then what's the thing to do? I mean, do I have something like control save or something?
It saves automatically. If you go to
Okay,
show over here and then
but
show it in a new window, you'll see automatically your site updating as it
okay,
modifies.
okay. I
Yeah.
get it now. Yeah, so
For some reason this is not redirecting. Oh, there we go. Hey, look at that. Beautiful. Nice bike. So notice though that our bike over here, although it looks nice, it's missing something that maybe it should have. Let me show you this here. If I go to make it responsive, look at this. On our iPhone version, it's cut off on the screen. That's fine if you don't mind that kind of thing, but what if we do? What if you wanted to actually not cut off like that? Well, you can make it responsive. So going on over here, yeah, if you add the attribute layout equals responsive, it'll become responsive. So try that also. Add layout equals responsive there and see if it then magically becomes responsive. I will do this too. Just get this off the screen here. I hear someone's child there. Hello, child. Anybody having problems doing this? I'll show you my screen here. So I added it over here at the end. That equals responsive. And then it will have the nice effect of getting smaller as the screen gets smaller and larger as it gets larger. AMP is doing this as you change the size, AMP changes the size of the actual image automatically for you. That's what AMP does to make things easier for you. It does this for you. There's various layout types that exist. If we go over here to documentation, there's a nice demo over here. Let's see if I can find this by searching for layout. This is a nice demo here. There's various different kinds here. There's fill, where it fills up the size of the container. Fixed, where it never changes, which is kind of useful a lot of the time, honestly. And then other kinds of things, including responsive, where it will shrink and grow with the container and things. Yeah, many options here. No display, not showing it at all. So lots of possibilities here for layout. Any questions on that? This is the most basic way to use AMP, making an image and modifying the attributes to make it how you want it to be. We had a very boisterous group on Tuesday where people did a lot of talking. Some groups are louder, some groups are quieter, and some groups change as they go. All right, so yes, we saw this a minute ago. Okay, let's do something else now. I mentioned before the AMP YouTube, let's embed a video also. So for this, we're just going to add the AMP YouTube component and use layout again and try using, for the first time, other attributes in our components. So this is what it is. AMP YouTube is our first extended component, which means AMP YouTube requires you to add its own JavaScript. All you need for this is the JavaScript and the ID of the video. This is the next assignment to do. So we haven't done this yet, or shown you how to do this yet. In this case, I would also refer to the documentation to figure out how to do this. So I would go to amp.dev, look up AMP YouTube, and find an example. I'll put that in the chat again. Amp.dev is our documentation site. It's not sending. Getting some weird effects over here today in my Google Meet. After my weird Zoom effects. Now there's this. Actually, my sending is disabled. This is really weird. Did I just send something to you? Did you get something from me? Did that appear in the chat? No? I feel like my Google Meet window has some sort of problem. And that's surprising to me. Huh. I've never seen this problem before in Google Meet, but I cannot send you anything in the chat. Have I pinned the screen? No, it's just not letting me actually send a message. I've lost the rights to do that somehow. I'm going to rejoin this and see if it's any better if I rejoin, which seems surprising, but I'm going to go away and come back. Maybe let me in again, Brigitte, and see if that helps.
Is Ben joining?
Okay. I'm
Yeah,
back.
Ben. We cannot hear you.
Now it's better.
Yeah, that's better.
Interesting. Okay, I'm going to present again here. Maybe I should present from over here instead. Hey, everyone. Okay, there we are again. So AMP YouTube, add this to your site. If you have questions about this, let me know. Here's the instructions again. Video ID, yeah, good idea. Whoops, that didn't work. You also can choose a video of your choice if you want to. Any video you want, but I'll copy the ID over here. And I'll show you also how to find the ID of other videos. Hold on a second. So here's the video ID that we recommend that you use.
Yeah.
Also, if you go to, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, hi Ben. Where are we supposed to add this? Oh, just after the image. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I'd put
see
it,
that, yeah.
actually, I put it, you can whatever you want to, really. It doesn't matter where it is. I put it personally somewhere within the main tags, but wherever you want is fine. If you're curious, if you go to YouTube and find a video, this is me, look at this. If you go to a video of some sort, the first thing here after the V equals, this thing here is the video ID. So if you want to have your own video in there of your own sort, use that instead. In fact, I'll do that too. And to actually finish this, you have to go to documentation, and you'll have to go there to get the JavaScript you need to add for the component as well. The JavaScript seems complicated, but it always follows the exact same format, or is named in the exact same way. Once you get it once, you get it again pretty easily.
Another question, like the script, are we supposed to put it near the this AMP YouTube component, or it can be anywhere in the page?
I would put it up on the head personally.
Okay, so I'm like I put it near the where I was using this component, so I put it just before this, but I
It
can
might
put
still
it.
work that way. It should
Yeah, it
probably
worked actually. Like
it'll probably work. The best way is to put it up in the head, because if you notice it says script async, that tells the browser to load it asynchronously, which means don't load it right away. Load it when it's kind of convenient to load it. So it shouldn't block the user from viewing your page. But it should also work, I guess, where you put it in the body. I've never tried that before.
I did put it in the body, like, but I could try like in the head.
Let's look at this one over here. Prashant. I don't see the video here.
I just copied on the chat. Yeah, the fan or something. I don't know how the glitch gave me a name by itself. So
yes.
Okay.
Those names.
I just removed it. If you refresh it.
By the way, you also can customize those names to whatever you want.
Okay.
No video yet, but Sumit may have a video here. Hey, the Parmesan Pacer. Very good. Does anybody else have this done? Very sad moment. My coffee is overdone. Anybody else stuck or have this? You also can go on to the solution, but I don't want to leave people behind. I will go on to the solution then, which is simply, there it is, AMP YouTube. Again, give it the data video ID, the layout, width, and the height, and that's it. Except for also adding the JavaScript at the top, or as we discovered, in the middle. It should be responsive also. Here's mine over here. If I look at this here and change the screen size, it will also change with the screen. Which is kind of neat, actually, that it does that. Any questions on this?
Yes. How are you changing the size of the screen on that page?
Oh, yeah. This is a feature of Chrome DevTools, and most browsers have similar DevTools now that do similar things. If you go, how did I do this actually? Over here
to
on the very
inspect.
bottom left, go to the thing
Sorry.
next to inspect. Next to the little inspect arrow, there's a picture of two different devices, two different rectangles. That lets you get to this area here where you get to choose, simulate different kinds of devices. I just chose responsive in this case, and responsive means you can just grow it and shrink it as you want to. You can simulate an iPad, for example. It will tell the site that this is an iPad and display it accordingly. A Galaxy phone. Responsive.
But are there any other options apart from responsive?
All the options I see can't see over here because it doesn't appear on the Google Meet, but there's different devices here. There's a Galaxy, there's an old iPhone 5, iPhone X.
I cannot see. It just says. Oh yeah, I see that. Yeah, okay. Now I see that. Yeah.
This is very useful because you're making your site.
Yeah.
You want to make sure it works on all devices because people usually go to sites on mobile phones more than desktop devices. So when you're designing your site, it's important to look at all these things.
Yes, good to know this.
Yeah, it's super useful.
Yeah, thanks.
Let's go on a little further. Let's add some more features over here. We're now going to practice finding a component whose name we don't even know, I think. I forget what this one actually is. It's been a long day. So to find other kinds of components, oh, okay, this we give you the name of, never mind. The next one you'll discover yourselves. This is adding an image carousel. I mentioned this before as a common feature on websites, although often thought to be a bad user experience. It's this little thing where you can slide between different images by pressing buttons or sliding with your fingers on a touch device. AMP has this, it's called AMP Carousel. It's a little more complicated, so it's going to require using documentation for this. So when you look at documentation, you look at things like, what does this component do? How can I customize it? Can I add attributes that will change its behavior in some way? Are there certain ways to style it with CSS? What is the script tag? What kind of layouts does it support? What kinds of features does it have? All these are important questions to ask yourself. Looking at documentation, which we have in the slide, but let's look at it on the screen instead because it's better to do that. So again, I'm going to go to amp.dev, our site, and look for AMP carousel, which I'm going to spell wrong. I'm heading around this microphone here, so I can't type very effectively. AMP carousel, and then it shows you this handy documentation. Up here is the script you'd need and a small copy button to copy it with. And then over here on the right, attributes you can use, like controls, for example. You can show those arrows in the screen or not. Does it autoplay? Does it loop? How should it look? There's an example over here of a carousel. Some sample code you can just copy and paste. Very useful. And also, if you want to do this afterwards, there's a little playground you can open up where you can change code here and see the results immediately, which is pretty handy for trying things out there spontaneously. Also, of course, glitch is useful for the same thing. Anyway, so let's go back over here to documentation. So you want to go there, and our next assignment is going to be to add an image carousel. Here's an example of a carousel. It looks like this. You have a carousel, as always, width and height, layout, and in this case also a type, because there's different kinds of carousels you can add. It can contain different AMP images. It can contain other kinds of content like text or videos or whatever you want. I'll show this quickly and move on because you'll now do this yourself. So I want you to make your own image slideshow. And remember how to use assets in Glitch. If you want to use images from this project, you go to your Glitch, go to the assets area at the top, and click on one of these images. It will expand. There's the image URL. You can copy it and use it in your site. You can also, of course, upload your own images or use things you find on the web, whatever you want. So the assignment here is to add an AMP carousel above the YouTube video if you want. It could be anywhere on the page, honestly. Make it responsive. Use type slides. Make it so it loops back so it never ends. So after you get to the last slide, you then return to the first slide. And there is a size there for the carousel and the images. And these three images it mentions here will look good if they're used, but you can use any image you want to. Any questions about this? This is our first really interactive feature we're making on our site. We're doing it like 40 minutes into our workshop, so you're making great progress. Any questions on that? Thanks for saying all clear. I appreciate it. So now I'm going to also mute my microphone over here and do this myself with you. And don't forget to add your JavaScript for the AMP carousel. Ideally at the top of the page in the head near the other script tags. Okay, mine is working. If you've got it, feel free to add your URL into the chat. If you're stuck, feel free to ask a question. I'm gonna have a little snack over here because it's kind of lunchtime over here in New Jersey. It's almost 1 o'clock. Okay, how are we doing here? I do see, oh, look at this. We've got some in the chat. Hey, look at this. That's autoplaying too. You must have chosen the autoplay attribute there. Very nice. Look at one more that's coming up here. What was that animal? Yeah, that's what they say. That is really disturbing. It looks happy though, so that's all that matters in the end. Not how you look to humans, but are you happy? Prashant, do you want any help there? You can pull yours up here if you'd like.
I added it, but I cannot see it anywhere, so I don't know
can see
what's
already
wrong.
what you're doing, I think. I think you're probably combining the video with the image carousel together because I see there's some arrows here.
Okay, yeah, okay, let me see.
You probably didn't close a tag somewhere.
No.
So here's your carousel. That looks nice. And there's your video. It also looks nice.
And I added the header script on the top.
Yeah, it's showing up. Let me look at it in the actual editor. You might see something we didn't see the other way. Getting lost now. Sorry, I'm confused. If you send me the link to look at it, well, I guess I can just do it this way.
No, I didn't do. But I think you have the right link. I see the same thing. You're saying, yeah.
I wanted to see your editor because it will do some nice formatting, which may make it easier to spot what's going on. So there's this div over here. We have alt tags, which is nice.
Type is slides.
It looks good so far. I think we're just missing something that's an HTML error, but not spotting. So
it could be the source. Maybe it's wrong somewhere.
Let's look at this again in the inspector.
If you go back to the source, I mean the third image. I mean it came. No, I'm just guessing if that causes a problem. You know, the source, and then semicolon in the third one. 1, 2, and 3. Yeah. If it comes to the second line, I don't know if that's the issue or something.
That might be confusing to HTML to have a new line in there.
Mm-hmm.
We can find out. We can actually look over here. I didn't do this. It actually is complaining about your carousel that it wants to have the width in there.
Oh.
Not just the height. But that shouldn't break everything like this. I know that it wants that. Let's just take a look. There's your YouTube there. Yeah, actually, it's throwing an error. Try to add the height there. Oh,
Where?
Sorry, add the width. I'm sorry. See, that makes it happier.
Oh, width for the carousel. Okay.
Yeah, it's going to require that for the carousel.
Okay.
Look, it's auto updating there as you're adding it there. It's trying to update the page.
I'm doing. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fine. Go ahead, do it.
Yes, now it comes. Yeah.
Need a quote there, I think. And there we go.
Yeah,
hey, that's what it was.
Yes.
So AMP didn't like the fact that there was no width.
Okay. That's expected in the coding. So like you made some silly mistakes.
So if you're using the AMP validator, then you can see these errors more quickly. Or if you're not using the validator extension, you can also, again, append that pound development equals 1 to your URL here, and it will show you these things in the console.
And how do you add that functionality? It comes back to the first slide, first image after the last slide.
I'll show you
what was
mine over here. Actually, documentation will give that to you. Loop.
Yeah, okay.
If you add loop in there somewhere as an attribute, it will then loop it around. Anyone else?
Okay, I will put it there. Yeah. Okay, I will find out and put it there. Yeah.
Anyone else have a question or want to show off your amazing carousel? If not, we will go on. We're going to do 2 more things here. This one is not more elaborate, but we're not going to give you the actual name of the component this time. You've got to find it yourself. By the way, there's your solution. You found this already yourselves. AMP carousel, width, height, layout type if you want, type equals slides, and a loop, and then images are in there, and then you're done. And of course, adding this JavaScript here makes it all work. So discovering new components, you just kind of think, okay, what do we need to do in this site? Usually you might say, I need to add this thing. I'm going to look around the web and find some JavaScript, or write my own JavaScript. With AMP, you find the right component. Or if you can't find a component, make your own JavaScript. But usually there's a component for things you want to do. There's a reference over here. If you return amp.dev, and I'm going to close these windows over here. If we return amp.dev, you can see all of these component names here on the left. There are many components. And again, this is an open source project. So if a component isn't there that you want to have, you could make it yourself, as long as everyone can use your component, not just you. And as long as those who are on the AMP committees prove the idea of the components and think it will be useful and not, break performance guarantees, you can add things. Here's this interesting body movement animation component, for example. There's an audio for audio tags. There's an accordion for accordion effects. Apester is some sort of thing someone added at some point. I don't know what that even is. There's analytics, experiment, date picker, all kinds of stuff. So our goal now is going to be, we discussed this before, to add social sharing links. So you want to find a component that lets you add social sharing links. And these kinds of things here that will look nice at the bottom of your screen, these lovely links, although in fact G+ now no longer exists. So you've got to find the component for adding social sharing links. It is an extended component, which means you've got to add JavaScript to make it work. So that's your assignment, to add social sharing links to the bottom. If you use this class over here, if you use a div with class social bar, the CSS that's part of your project make them look all beautiful, like little circles like this. You don't have to, but it's a nice style that we gave you to use for your project. If you use the size 44 by 44, they should also look nice. You can choose the 4 recommended here: email, Tumblr, LinkedIn, and Twitter, or whatever else you want to. So now you want to go to amp.dev, find some sort of social sharing stuff, add that to your site. Any questions on that? And go ahead and give it a try. If you have questions as we go, please ask questions. And if you get this, please add your link here in the chat. First of all, did you find the right component to use? Hopefully you did. Just showing how it can look when you're done. Here is my project over here. We have 4 lovely links there on the bottom. No pressure. I've done this before, so for me it's kind of easier. How are we doing here? Hopefully you've now discovered this component over here, amp social share. This is what you're going to use to make this happen. Okay, I see something in the chat over here. How do you add gaps? Oh, there you go. You mean gap between the items there? Mine had no gaps, but you can do it with the CSS if you want to. So it looks like you also don't have the div around that, which makes them centered. The div class equals social share. If you wrap them in that, if you wrap all these things in a div, which is called div class equals social share, it will center them all. If you want to add gaps, that's with CSS. So if I, for example, if I was in CSS there, whoops, now you're changing it. I can't show you. I'll show you on mine here. So if I was going to add something, I don't know. You should do this also, of course, in your project, not here in the dev tools. If I added something here that made amp social share have some padding, probably margin would be good, I think. Yeah. I'm doing the wrong thing. But padding then, wasn't it? That's what I was afraid was going to happen with padding. You think this would give me a nice margin between things, but it's not doing that. Oh, there we go. So if I actually went to my CSS here and I added that, it might get some nice spacing.
Ben, are we supposed to provide the actual link to our website, or it's just like symbols, icons?
What's the question? I'm sorry. Can you?
Sorry.
Not quite.
Yeah, I mean, it's just that now I could see like this bar with the 4 icons, but
Yeah.
are we supposed to provide the functionality that you click and go to the proper link, like my Facebook page or my LinkedIn page?
You could, but you don't have to because it's already
Okay.
built in to AMP that will just go to, yeah, I guess you can. Looking at mine now. I think what this does is it will share this page automatically on these things. So
It will share this page. Okay, I get it. Yeah. Okay. I thought like yeah, okay. I misunderstood maybe. Yeah.
It's actually kind of a weird component because the way I do this usually is I just do a link and put it in the link what I wanted to do. The link could be, go to Twitter and tweet this certain text, for example. This is more of a predefined sharing of the current page. If you want to get more flexibility, you just make an href, an anchor link, and just go from there. I'm going to actually add here some nicer styling, which inspired me. Social share. There's all those things there. That's nice. A little separation. Usually the AMP way is to customize things with HTML. I customize things with CSS. Here we have, very nice, look at that. 4 beautiful social sharing links. Any more questions about this? I feel like we've got it or we've just not got it. Here's the answer. If we have it in this div class social bar, we have CSS that will center things for you, and then simply amp social share on the type you want, and there you are. And again, to get more customizable social sharing, you could just do an href instead, add your own links. And of course, adding this. So after all this AMP usage here, we have one more exercise that's more complicated. But before the last exercise, do you have any questions or thoughts about AMP or other important matters that have come up?
It looks like it has its own tagging way of doing stuff.
You're very quiet. I heard you talking about tagging, but your volume is very low.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
I was wondering, it has its own tagging, its own syntax. So when you're building a website, do you need to output that because you have the normal HTML and then you have this?
It's not got its own syntax really. It just follows the rules of HTML. So AMP pages are just web pages, and they follow the same guidelines as other web pages that work in just any kind of modern browser. So you're going to use different tags than usual, like AMP carousel maybe, or AMP YouTube. Everything else is the same as normal HTML, if that was your question. So my HTML here is just HTML. This happens to involve different tags in some cases. Happens to include at the top this AMP JavaScript that makes those tags all do something. Otherwise, it's the same syntax as HTML always has. That's why AMP is kind of intriguing, because it really just is web pages. And instead of changing the way browsers worked, it used existing technologies to make things just quicker and hopefully easier. Was that the question?
Yep, kind of. It's basically.
It's often thought that AMP is something kind of new and different, but it isn't supposed to be. It's just a different way of making web pages, but that follows the usual rules. And it's actually possible also to merge AMP components into other web pages that are not AMP pages. You can do that. It just may not always work the way you expect it to work, because AMP expects to control the page, but in practice, it seems to always work pretty well. And actually, the AMP team is working on making this true officially. So sometime next year, hopefully, when they finish all this work, you'll be able to officially add AMP components to any web page by adding AMP's JavaScript. And you can then just add AMP carousel or whatever you want to other web pages out there, making AMP even more part of the rest of the web than it is now. Because now it kind of requires using AMP or not AMP, which is kind of a hassle. So you'll have a choice. Although I will say also that it's very common to have a website with some AMP pages and some non-AMP pages. A really common pattern is to have the first page users get to from search, the first landing page, be AMP pages. And then as things get more complicated, as you have more functionality, to go from there to non-AMP pages or even to a PWA. Any other questions or observations so far? If not, we'll go to our final exercise. This actually is the end of the first course, but I added one more thing for fun to make it a little more challenging. Before we do that, more about AMP a little bit. You noticed before the CSS was included in line. This makes your page faster because it saves network requests. Restrictions, you can't add tons of CSS because it also is slow. AMP wants you to have no more than 75K of CSS. Actually, it was 50K. That was kind of hard to meet that limit. We increased it recently, 75K. Almost all CSS is allowed. A couple of things that tend to use a lot of CPU time are disallowed. And bang important can override what AMP is doing. That also is not allowed in valid AMP pages. Otherwise, CSS is what it is. You can have whatever you want to. Animations, go crazy. Here's how it looks. We did this before already. Why valid AMP helps. We did this before too. Okay, the bonus exercise. This actually is from the next course. So it's going to involve a bit of interaction. So here's how you'd make things work in jQuery. Remember jQuery? jQuery changed the web a little while ago. It's still very commonly used. Let's say you wanted to actually have a button that hid a div over here. So you might use something kind of like this. You'd add to the button an on-click event handler, and you'd grab the warning div and then just do warning dot hide. And jQuery's hide method would do display none and would hide that thing. AMP is pretty similar to that. Here's the same thing in AMP. You would have this on attribute on the button, and you would look for the tap event. AMP will take browser events like click, other kinds of things, and pass those along to you in ways that make them easier to use. In this case, tap either as a click of a mouse on a desktop device or a tap on a mobile device or whatever touchscreen. And then it would look for the warning ID. If it finds that, you can then use this method called hide to hide it. It's the same kind of syntax. If you go to amp.dev again and look up actions and events, you will see a nice description of AMP's actions and events system. So given browser events, you can take various kinds of actions. And you follow the same syntax I showed you a minute ago, where you choose the event name, colon, the ID of the target div, or target rather HTML element you want to do something to, and then a dot, and the action you want to take. The action could be something like hiding it, showing it, doing other kinds of things. Certain AMP components have their own custom events. So for example, what is some examples over here? Well, this is HTML element. When an input content changes, the change event gets fired. There's custom events like this. When you change the slide in a carousel, it fires a slide change event. And certain actions work for everything. For example, you can hide or show, toggle the visibility of any element, change classes, scroll to something. All those things are true for any element in AMP. And then certain components of other kinds of actions, like for example, for an audio file, you could play it or pause it. There's a lot of stuff you can do, and this can go on for quite a while learning about the various things to make interactive pages in AMP. But simply, in this case over here, we're just going to use tap, and we're going to use some simple actions. Any questions on that? We'll use this now to make a navigation menu. And to do this, we're going to use events and actions, because we're going to have this button over here. We're going to click the standard hamburger menu button. When I clicked it, will open this sidebar. And when you click the X, it will close the sidebar. We're going to use a component called amp sidebar. When you get the page first loaded, your content's going to be hidden. And the way this works is sidebar understands actions like open and close, which open and close the sidebar, and toggle, which toggles the state between being open and closed. If you choose no action at all, I think there's a default that it does, which I forget what it is. So here we go. This is going to require documentation, amp sidebar. We're going to do a bunch of different things over here. We're going to add a div with those 3 lines in it that toggles the menu. If you give the div class navbar trigger, it will look nice. We're going to add an amp sidebar. And it's important to add it right below the body. If you add the amp sidebar somewhere else in the page, it will still work. You may have some strange effects though, because the amp sidebar adds this big gray thing that hides the entire screen with the Z index. And if you add the amp sidebar somewhere else in this project, there'll be a confusion with the Z index that might look a little bit strange. The sidebar, you just put into there a nav element with class nav, add in there some links for your menu. So just a standard HTML menu of unordered links. If you give them class label, ali tags class nav item, then it'll look nice. And finally, you're going to add a div with an X in it, which will close the menu when it's tapped. That's a lot of stuff, but I know you can do it. We've gotten this far. This is our last project. We're almost there. I'm going to actually paste into the chat those little extended characters for the hamburger menu and the X. So here comes the 3 lines in the chat, which you can use for your opening the menu button. And then here's a little X you can use for the closing menu button. This is more complicated. If you have questions, then please don't be shy of asking these questions either on the microphone or in the chat.
Ben, Prashant here again. Can you please share that, I mean, the output, how it should look like once again?
Oh yeah, when you get this done, it should look kind of like this. You click on that little button
Yeah,
there.
okay, this there. Okay.
That shows up. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Minus this little expanding thing that happens there. You don't have submenus yet. You just
Yeah.
have the 4 links in there.
Mm-hmm.
Just to show that it can be done, here's my site, the menu, and there we are. Don't get discouraged though, because I've done this before a couple of times. How are we doing here, by the way? Is anybody close to this? We're stuck. Okay, we're seeing some things happening here. It's a menu and, ooh, look at that. It works. All you like over here is the styling you'll need for those items to look a little nicer than they do, and to give this thing a width. But you have a style for the menu because it's the right size, or sorry, the menu button, and for the X, the sidebar works. That's the important stuff. The rest is just details. Well done. I'll go for about maybe 2 or 3 more minutes, and I'll show you the solution. Nice job. Okay, let's see it again. Yeah, look at that. A plus. Okay, anybody else have something to share? Or want any help? We can provide help. Going once, going twice. Here's the solution. So we put into the header this new div over here with this class navbar trigger to make it look nice. And it wants you to have this tab index there and this rule for accessibility issues, because this is better for screen readers, for those who can't see. And you can then tab around and know where you are. And the money thing here is this on attribute. On tap, find sidebar 1 and toggle its state. You can use open instead of toggle if you want to. And then here's the sidebar itself. It could be the ID sidebar 1 so that the button could use it to grab that thing and take the action of toggling. And we use layout equals no display because that way it won't get shown when you first load up the page. Put on the left side in this case because is where our menu is. And then you see our div with that navbar trigger class. To make it look nice, there's the on tap sidebar 1 toggle again, which will close it, and the little X, and then our menu. That's it. And then we add this script at the beginning, which is AMP's JavaScript that runs the sidebar. Any questions on all of that? that's kind of it then. I'm going to skip this part, but we discussed this before. The stuff that you use to start up AMP. Unless you have questions about these things in particular, we're going to skip over all this stuff here and say, hey, look at this. In the last like hour and a half or so, less than that, we built a simple AMP page with images, social sharing buttons, the image carousel, YouTube video, and also, if you got this part done, also a menu. So there you go, a basic page, all done pretty quickly. If you want to take the next course, you can. The intermediate course is available on amp.dev also. Learn more about how to make more kinds of elaborate actions, how to load data and display it on the screen, how to respond to more user inputs, those kinds of things. If you need the answers, this glitch repo over here has all of the stuff from the beginning course minus the menu. And I was saying there's a course for all these things online. This is a compressed version of these courses. Look at this, you get an ad for Wharton. These courses over here. This was the beginning course plus a bit of the intermediate course, minus some details about the web. And you can do the next courses here if you want to. More stuff to do, subscription forms, making components interact, all kinds of stuff. It's an advanced course also. There's various things you can do. I'll put this link here also into the chat. Actually, let's put the link to the whole thing in the chat. Any questions, observations?
So this is mostly for mobile. So can it be? Does it have components for GPS and stuff like that?
That's a really good question, actually. It was made for mobile phones. It's now a thing that works on all devices. So, for example, this site you're looking at over here, amp.dev, this site works on desktop. It's also AMP, but it usually is used for mobile devices. But AMP doesn't have actually a lot of components for the more advanced features like that because there wasn't really demand for that for people using AMP. There certainly could be, but there really hasn't been that kind of support. You could add those things, certainly. You could add components for those things, but people haven't done that. I think in general, AMP gets used for more simple kind of sites like content sites, landing pages, basic interactive sites, basic e-commerce pages, travel pages, things that are more elaborate that would use GPS to show something fancy, interactive maps or something else. Usually wouldn't use AMP because you do have more JavaScript. It wouldn't be the best use case for AMP.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions? Thanks for saying very nice.